So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scoreboard. I am Jared Kimber. Well, Joe Root opened the bowling. It's quite clear there that England don't give a single shit anymore about anything. Just the second time in 100 years that England have opened the bowling on the first day of a test with a spinner. Jack Leach did it, I think, in Pakistan. So I suppose it's a trend now. But why not do it with your best batter? And of course, he reverted to normal Joe Root, not magical Joe Root with the ball here. And he did not bowl particularly well. He bowled like a part-timer, which, of course, at this stage, he's a high-functioning part-timer. But they had another off-spin who did a little bit better, and Shoaib Bashir, who took the wicket of Rohit Sharma. What a way to start your test career, especially as a spinner. Like, you know, that's a nice one. And picking him up at leg slip with a tidy little strangle as well. Good captaincy from Ben Stokes there. But really early on, this was all about Jaiswal punishing balls really on width, I suppose, early on, and then later on maybe more on length, which just shows you the flexibility he has as a player. It's remarkable. You have a look at his wagon wheel. Man hit the ball everywhere, right? Shubman Gill failed again. I'm sure we will talk about that later. And after giving all their wickets away pretty much in the first innings last time, this time they lost 2 middle order players to a cut shot that obviously didn't go quite as well as they would have liked it to go. There was also another caught behind off a shooter. I don't even know how you get caught behind off a ball that's almost rolling along the ground, but Shreyas Iyer managed to do that. And Patidar punched the ball into the pitch and got backspin off his punch and ended up getting himself bowled. But I suppose it was the 2 loose cuts late in the day that really kept England interested a little bit. In fact, even with Jaiswal, this was a pretty good day for England. Either they are great at making Indians donate their wickets, perhaps, or they're just getting lucky consistently at this point. But I think if India had ended up at 300 for 2, obviously you'd be looking at a pretty clear-cut Indian victory. On a fairly flat pitch, England did a lot better than that. I think it's probably they will feel very, very optimistic, but they probably deserve some of that optimism compared to certainly how they felt after days 1 and 2 of the last Test match. But weirdly, I think England probably had the better of the day when you consider the pitch and the way they bowled and what the scorers ended up. But India are probably well ahead on the game. Although you can get England at around 9 and 10 to 1 at the moment. So if you're that way inclined, it doesn't really feel like a 9 or 10 to 1 game from here. But certainly India in control. All right, let us scoreboard, shall we? And we're going to start with Jaiswal. He was pretty good, wasn't he? How good was he? Jaiswal is better than Bradman. Pause. At converting in first-class cricket at the moment. So it turns out, someone mentioned this on our Discord. In fact, I should be able to bring him up. I think his name was A over on the Discord. And now I've lost him. But yeah, whoever it was, great work. Yeah, he just comes up as A. So A came up with this, and then because we were working with CricViz at TalkSport, CricViz then went and looked it up. Soham went and looked it up for us, and it turns out that Jaiswal has 1,104 50s in his 15 scores when he's passed 50 in first-class cricket so far. So of the players who have in their career passed 50 more than 15 times, he has the greatest conversion rate ever. And you can see he's number 2 on the list is Bradman, and he's a fair chunk ahead of Bradman at the moment. It's not from many innings, of course. But take that, Donald. It doesn't look like a fluke either, because if you watch him in the IPL, there's also a consistent pattern there of once he's set of going on to get fairly bigger scores in T20 cricket. There'll be a regression, of course. He's not going to stay better than Bradman at this stat, and Bradman is just a man apart. Although Sarfaraz is also, I think, 6th best on this stat, by the way. But it does show you just how, special this first part of his career has been, averaging over 60 in first-class cricket. And again, just looking magnificent in a test match today. When Padikkal was out, he had 57% of India's runs. And to be honest, it felt like 70% of India's runs. In fact, I feel like this is a disappointing split when you look at it. But he was on 141, I think, and they were on 249 at the time. Batted magnificently again. Rohit got that little strangle. I got the one who kept low. Gill pushed at the Jimmy Anderson one, and Padikkal obviously patted one into the pitch and was bowled. Disappointed I didn't say that in the intro, actually. Jaiswal really kept that top 5 going. And remember, this is a top 5, this Indian side, right? Like at number 6, they have Akshar. Number 7, they have KS. And at number 8, they have Ashwin. So it's not like the previous batting lineup or anything like that, or some of the other really strong batting lineups that India has had, if they had Rishabh Pant in this side or something along those lines. So for him to be outscoring pretty much the top 5 players, I think is fairly remarkable. But let's look at why he found it so easy to score today. This is the This is the English spinners by length. So if you're a spinner, this is where you want to bowl. So they're there just under 50% of their time. Indian spinners are generally bowling this length around 60 to 65% of their time. So you can see that to start with, the English spinners are just not as accurate. That's fine. We've got 3 kids, a part-timer in this test match. We're not expecting them to be, and they were roughly like this in the last test as well. But this is where I think Jaiswal really did well today. So you can see what's that, 28% of the time, they're bowling full and over-pitching. He really attacked that quite a bit today. And even some of the other players when they got those options. But you can see also just dropping short way too much and too many full tosses again. I think there's an interesting conversation we had going ahead of, in the first match, India gave away their wickets when they were trying to put pressure on the English spinners, and they didn't need to. And in this match, they've actually lost a couple of wickets to half-trackers when, just trying to punish the bad balls. So it's like both methods haven't quite worked for them at times. And I thought outside of Jaiswal, there are times today where I wasn't quite sure what Indian batters were trying to do. There was all this talk about the sweeps and the reverse sweeps and everything else. But it just looked like they weren't sure what gear to find on what was fairly good surface for batting, right? So it was an interesting one from that point of view. But let's look at the player that Jaiswal did not score against. This is remarkable, actually. So you can see all the spinners. Obviously, the left-arm finger spinner, he's at more than a run a ball. The 2 offies down here, he's scoring good against, and against the leg spinner, he did well. And here's Jimmy Anderson. This is 8 runs from 47 balls, which is incredibly extreme. But it should be... this is one of the things I'm kind of looking for. If he did this every time he played, this would be a problem. But overall, I'm looking for this kind of stuff because it shows me that he's willing to cash in on the matchup that works best, and is willing to respect that by far the best bowler today was Jimmy Anderson, right? And even the two off spinners, he's still scoring well over 3 runs and over against both of them as well. So I really like this kind of map. And again, it shows that Jaiswal is a proper first-class batter. He has gears, he understands the game, he's more than willing to dead bat someone if he has to, because he knows he can cash in other places. So I really, really like that. Also, shout out to Jimmy Anderson today. We'll get to it later, but actually, no, we will get to it later because I do think it is quite an interesting thing to talk about. But just on the pattern in general, because this is today, this is Jaiswal's average against pace and spin in Test cricket so far. So it's only from 6 tests, so not a huge sample size. But you can see here, he's averaging over 100 against spin so far and under 40 against pace. I'd be more worried if this was under 30 against pace, but it's more the disparity between the two that makes the pace look worse here. And because this is a small sample size, it's also then worth having a little bit of a look at economy to see if the pattern sort of holds up. You can see the rough pattern holds up here, but the one big difference, of course, here is that this is from a lot of balls, and so we know we can trust this a little bit more. There's no doubt at the moment that Jaiswal prefers spin to pace, but I'm also not worried about his game against pace, partly because of the way he played Anderson today. Anderson really tried to work him over, beat his bat. I think it was the second spell where he beat his bat just like a lot, right? But Jaiswal just, stayed in his line. And I think it was the third spell where he just looked a lot more comfortable. I mean, that's kind of what you do as an opening batter, right? Yeah. So again, really, really good from him. Fantastic inning. He's not finished yet, so fuck knows what I'm going to say about him tomorrow. But, if he does go on, and he might be the difference between India feeling confident and India thinking that, a couple of sessions of Bazball might bring them back. And it should be a good wicket to Bazball on unless the Indian bowlers bowl fantastic as well. Or we get shooters. Let's go to Padikkal. So this is just a bit of a scouting report before we get to the full one on him. But, I think there are obviously other players that they could have brought into the side, but I think they're looking for that kind of replacement of Rahane and Pujara, if not in talent, then kind of in temperament, perhaps in experience and age as well, just little things like that. I know Padikkal hasn't played a lot of first-class cricket for someone of his age, but he's been on the circuit for whatever it is, 10 or 12 years at this point. He's very experienced. If you look at him compared to, I'm trying to think of someone else, someone like Shreyas Iyer. So you look at Shreyas Iyer, obviously has a much higher ceiling than Padikkal, but Shreyas Iyer is still developing his game and trying to work out what he's doing against pace. We saw that phenomenal ball against Jimmy Anderson where he walked outside of off stump, then he walked back behind leg stump, and then he tried a forehand smash, right? Look at what Padikkal's doing. Getting behind the ball, you're waiting for it to come to him, punishing the bad balls, rotating the other ones, all the good things you like, calm, organised experience. I think for me, I really like the fact he was watching the ball right under his eyes, almost a Kane Williamson-like trait, not getting too far ahead of himself. Just a lot to like there. But I just wanted to have a look at his record as well, and just to show you. So you can see here, this is 2019 and 2020, where he really, really struggles. But even if you go back further, he's a good player here, but a couple of years averaging quite low. And then this period here, when he gets really good, remember there's a missing year here in 2021. And I've seen this pattern with quite a few players now, that it's very rare in professional cricket for you to have like a year to work on your game, right? But during COVID, a lot of players had, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 15 months, in the nets, bowling machines, working with coaches, whatever it may be, to actually improve their game. And I think he's probably one of these players who took that and made full advantage of it. Not everyone did. Sometimes it's just hard, right? You are who you are. But my guess is, just looking at this record, that he's just a more complete player now. I compared him to Kane Williamson, the way he sort of hits the ball under his eyes. But there's a bit of Jonathan Trott to his game as well. It looks like there aren't many things that can go wrong, I suppose, would be the best way of putting it. And it's interesting that, this is now a really good clump of first-class cricket that he's played. And this is from CricViz. This is his record. So we can see here, not great against left-arm pace. Against right-arm pace, absolutely fantastic. And against off-spin, brilliant. And a left-arm finger spin. So this is since 2022. So this is the one number I was probably most interested in, just because, in India, he will face a lot of left-arm finger spin at the test level. I want to see how this number holds up, especially if the wicket starts to go. So in the second innings, that will be interesting to have a look at. But nothing massively too concerning here. And I just, because he had this great record against off-spin, it made me think of his record in T20 cricket. Because I did wonder if they were looking for if not a Pujara person in the batting order, but then a Pujara replacement who can play spin at a very high level inside of India. And I was basing that on his T20 numbers. And you can see here, very high average against spin in T20 cricket, where his average against pace bowling goes down a little bit. But coming back to look at this, I'm not sure if that holds up as much. But yeah, I really like him as a player. Obviously have seen him in T20, but don't think, unless I saw him. No, I don't think. I've seen some highlights of him playing red ball cricket, but certainly haven't seen much work that he's done there. But there's a lot to like for him as a test player, and a little bit unlucky today. Maybe, I was going to say better footwork, but it's kind of better footwork to kick the ball away is what he needed today. But that was my scanning report on Padikkal. Oh, and there's a cool little thing I've noticed, actually. Oh. No, my guys have got the wrong one. The next slide, Muku, if you're watching, should be the Gill versus Pace. No. Oh, where is it? I've taken it away. It should be Gill wicket in first test, Muku, if you're listening. I'll give the boys a couple of minutes to update that. But yeah, so when DRS comes in, of course, and even before that, the way that you play spin, specifically spin that is moving away from you, has changed quite a bit. So that, you know, left arm finger spinners used to spend a bit of time over the wicket and a bit of time around the wicket. Generally now, they're over the wicket. They're around the wicket to right-handers, unless something's gone very, very, very poorly. The same with off spinners. And it's because of the ability to get you caught behind, caught slip, LBW and bowled all from that angle. And beforehand, that wasn't as much the case because you didn't really get LBWs, and it was even hard for a spinner to bowl batters a lot of the time because they had their pads and their bats in front of the stumps. DRS comes along, you can't just put your pads in front of the stumps anymore. It means you have to bat with your bat further out in front of you. We've seen on ragging wickets how that makes it really hard for modern players, even great players of spin, to handle those sorts of things. But something quite interesting I've noticed about India specifically and how they play spin, there we go, is that England have started using a silly point. So this is from the first test. And you can see here, this is Shubman Gill, and he pushes this more or less off, when I say the middle of the bat, it was kind of off the outside middle of the bat, but it wasn't an edge. And it went straight to silly point and was caught. And I saw, I want to say about 4 or 5 times today, where the Indians were pushing their bat out in front of their pad, and off the middle of the bat, it was almost being caught. So there was one that I think just went wide of silly point. There was another one that popped up, but there wasn't a silly point there. And maybe another one that was sort of squeezed squarer, but again, off the sort of the face of the bat. Now, this position, this silly point position, as I said, when you're not thrusting your bat and pad together, that was what it used to be there for, that kind of the inside edge onto that. Maybe if you're thrusting it as well, you might, get it off the pad, off the gloves, and bounce up in the air and come over here. Whereas now, we generally see the field up more in this area. But if you do have your bat ahead of you and you are pushing, there is a chance for the ball to be almost middled into those positions over there. Really interesting that England have already gone with this for Hartley. It's not something that we don't see in Test cricket, but it's something that we don't see kind of automatically in Test cricket for a long time. So will be interesting to see if that is a bit of a trend, and teams are looking at that as well. I'd love to. I haven't noticed anyone doing that before, but I would say that's probably something that's happened over the last couple of years and is starting to creep in a little bit more. All right, let us get to Jimmy Anderson. Well, I was going to start with something I was going to say before, but Jimmy Anderson is 41, and England thought, do you know what, mate? You bowled more deliveries than any seam bowler's ever bowled. How about you come to India and we get you to bowl medium pace bounces at Shreyas Iyer? Like, the things that England make Jimmy Anderson do. And he's the only seamer in the side, right? Like, it's him or no one. It's him or Joe Root who bowled a bouncer at one stage. And Joe Root's bouncer was 123 Ks, didn't really bounce, to be fair. And Jimmy Anderson's was 126. I'm just saying. It does tell you something. But I thought he was exceptional today. This is from Cinema. You see his length 54% of the time, on a good length, but just deadly accurate. He just didn't bowl any bad balls. I thought he was absolutely fantastic the way he went about things. He was bowling with the wobble ball. Occasionally, tried some swing, but it was mostly wobble ball. There might have been a reverse swing attempt later on, but I don't think he really got the ball to hoop around all that much. But deadly accurate. This is his economy rate today. So we've already showed you him versus Jaiswal, but this is him against in the first session alone. So this is a session that you wouldn't really expect your spinners to come on and get hit. And you can see straight away, just like it was impossible to hit Anderson, and he troubled the openers. There were false shots being played. Definitely could have got more wickets on a different day, probably could have, really put England in front at this point. I just want to look at his economy by year. Now, fair to say this is kind of a different Jimmy Anderson. All right, that was the young, quick, wasn't always in control of the ball, swung it a long way, but couldn't control the swing and everything else. But it is remarkable that he has managed to, bring his economy down, even from what should have been his peak. These are all good years, and he's still bringing it down. This is just this game, but it looks really good. But the point being is, even last year, still well under 3, well under 2.5 the year before, 2021. It's ridiculous how little people have looked out to score against him. And, one thing I was thinking about with this is, very specifically about, what's the best way of putting it? Very, very specifically that if you compared him to McGrath, who was probably a little bit quicker and also had the height, and McGrath never had swing, whereas Anderson does have swing, and yet Anderson's still in Asia, even without the extra height and without his main skill of swinging it around. Still, people just find it hard to score off him, right? It's miraculous, really. This is so I showed you the first session before, but this is the economy rates all day. Eventually, obviously, as the ball got soft. Interesting note on Bashir, I just want to point out. I looked at his first class record. He's got quite a good record when bowling with the new ball. He does often struggle later on. I think that might just be because he's a tall bowler and the extra bounce helps him. It's just something worth looking at, because I did think he probably looked a little bit better on between that 10 to 30 over mark than he did at other points. But this is just massive. The economies today, when you look at that, Anderson is just absolutely different, gravy than everyone else, and he's basically replaced Leach from the last test, right? So again, they're still having that same issue with the other bowlers going for a little bit extra runs and really struggling. So every test, really, they've come in with one person who can keep the runs low, although I thought Wood did a decent job in that last test as well. This is Jimmy Anderson economy rate by series in Asia since 2021. 1.5 runs and over. 1.9 runs and over. 2.2 runs and over. Yeah, some of this was Pakistan batters. This is still pretty special, though. And this is absolutely magnificent. And this is going back to that Glenn McGrath point I was making before of it's the deadly accuracy. He just doesn't really give you a ball that you can hit. And also, in these sorts of conditions, it kind of, in some ways, is slightly freeing for him that he knows he just has to hit a good line and a good length. He doesn't have to worry as much about, changing angles changing angles is the wrong way to put it. It probably does have to change angles. He doesn't have to worry about, getting it to move in, getting it to move away, worrying about the swing, and all those sorts of other little bits. It literally is, like a computer game character, just putting a square where he wants to bowl it and trying to hit that as much as possible and keeping the pressure on. It's a remarkable record, though. Absolutely remarkable. And this is his economy rate in Asia compared to his last 5 years compared to the rest of his career, or to his total career mark. So you can see here, he's at 1.94, and for the rest of his career, he's been at 2.52. So last 5 years in Asia, he's actually 0.6 runs and over, more frugal than he's ever been in Asia before, which I think comes back to that accuracy thing. The older he gets, the more accurate he seems to get. But you can also see there's a bigger difference here than there is outside Asia, but he's getting more economical everywhere else. But a lot of that mark is coming from when he does come to Asia, no one can hit him off the square. It's a big part of England's success when they go to places like Sri Lanka and Pakistan that we don't talk about enough. And this is his overs per match in Asia versus outside of Asia. Again, last 5 years compared to everywhere else. We know that they're using him not so much. We also know that when he travels, he often doesn't get used as much. That's been going for a long time. But he's bowling 5 overs less in Asia. I actually think that was higher than what I thought that mark would have been. But you can see again, this gap is much closer than this gap. So it's all quite obvious here that Jimmy Anderson is bowling just very deadly accurate, and really controlling games for England, even when he's not bowling, a massive amount of overs. but this is his percentage of wickets by spell since 2012. So in India, he's taking 16% of his wickets in his first spell and doing all of his work later on. And you can see when he's playing in England, he's taking 33% of his wickets with his first spell and 67. I actually think, Gio put this up, I actually think there's a better stat than this as well, because in England, he still gets the Duke's ball for the second and third spells. I'd love to see him checked against the Kookaburra ball in his second and third spells compared to everyone else. But it does tell you that he doesn't really become less. It does tell you that he continues to take wickets later on in India with this old ball. Like 84% of his wickets is a massive amount, so he's a constant threat. So the whole idea of Jimmy Clouderson is kind of the opposite in Asia, right? Because in Asia, his real strength is his ability to be economical all the way through and be a wicket-taking threat all the way through, which is, kind of different than the narrative, I would say. This is Intelligent Cricket, our friends at Intelligent Cricket. And this is talking about Gill versus... Is this Gill versus Anderson? Oh, yeah. So this is... So in 7 innings, Gill averages 7.75 against him. I think it's something silly, like 35 balls or something. And he's just absolutely not found any way to get away from Anderson. Someone said in the comments... I don't want to answer it too much because I'll try and bring their comment up later, but someone's brought up a technical part of it in his comments today. But what I thought was that he didn't actually leave the ball against Anderson. And I do think Gill is a player rather than a leaver. I know he can leave the ball, but especially with, I think he would probably be the sort of player in the old days of cricket when big outswingers happened, he would probably leave the ball a lot more. But because everything's angling into him now, and I know he's been done once or twice with that shot as well, he's probably not as natural a lever in modern cricket, which maybe is what catches him out against Anderson. To be honest, I don't think Anderson gives you that many balls to leave anymore as well. But that one today probably was one, have to go back and do a deep dive into it. But this is Anderson by Indian batters average since Gill's debut, and you can see poor Rahane down here averaging 3.25. But Rohit, Rishabh Pant, Kohli, and Carroll all handling pretty well. But there's 3 guys down here who certainly struggled, and Gill is one of them. The problem for Gill is it's the absolute worst case scenario, right? He comes into this test not in great form. I thought he saw the ball okay. And then Anderson kind of works him over, and he's gone on. It was a fantastic ball as well. It's a wobble ball that seemed away, second spell? Magnificent effort there. This is from CricViz. And I was absolutely shocked at this. Not because I don't think of Shubman Gill as weaker on the front foot, but I didn't think the disparity between the averages would be so massive. So you could see averaging under 18 on the front foot and almost 55 on the back foot versus pace in Test cricket at the moment. It's a bigger problem if you're an Asian batter, I would have thought, just because if you're in Australia, South Africa, maybe you can get away with that a little bit. I don't really know how Shubman Gill gets away with that, right? He's kind of a little bit trapped in this situation where he's going to be facing a lot of pacers not a lot of pacers, but when he faces pace, he's going to be facing a lot of balls pitching up. We know he's got that issue with the ball coming back into him as well. There's a couple of little things there. His talent level is still huge, and I still would back him to overcome it. The issue is, with modern cricket, how does he overcome it without doing it while he's playing? He's not really going to get a chance to go off in first-class cricket and do it. He's not going to get probably a big break to look at in the nets now that he's an Indian all-format player as well. It's kind of tricky, I think, from that point of view, but really interesting, and we'll keep our eye on that. Well, that's the end of the scoreboard for the day. But of course, if you are on this chat and you want to ask a question, you can. The best way to ask questions, always with the super chats. Mostly because I'm lazy and they just automatically, I just can't miss them. But if you do want to ask a question, please do. We'll play a long ad here while I go through the best of the chat room so far. But I am Jared Kimber, and this is the Scoreboard. A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? then I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I'm sitting on a new one right now. I'm the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric, ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings. All right, welcome back. Just remember, if you put 100 million comments in, I'm probably just going to ban you from the room rather than answer any of your comments, especially if most of them seem to be nonsense. Yeah, anyway, what else have we got here? Just going through a couple. Let's see, but not many questions to come through today. So we've still got quite a bit of time left. I mean, there's no actual time limit on the show, but my point being, if you do want to ask a question, super chat or otherwise, it's probably a good day to do that. Lots of people in the chat though, so a big thanks to who have we got? Shretand, King Pear is in here, Rahul, Matthew John, and a few others. But let's have a look at what we have here. DM says, thoughts on England selections? Feels like today was a prime example of how difficult it is to rotate four spinners. Also, why do they announce it the night before? Drives me mad. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason for a team to announce it the night before. It's just part of the whole baseball thing. It also did become a thing, though, I suppose, because England, so much of English cricket journalism is about who is going to be in the side and who's not going to be in the side, that I think they were just kind of frustrated with the journalists kind of sniffing around. You know, there was that time they found it in the rubbish and, you know, messaging people the night before to ask them questions and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's a few different reasons, but from an analyst and a technical point of view, it's a bizarre thing to do. I don't disagree. I've talked about it a lot. I remember when New Zealand did it with Devon Conway and we weren't 100% sure Devon Conway was going to play. Why would you allow the England bowlers to watch more footage of Devon Conway beforehand? Never really made any sense to me. Yeah, I think probably looking at it now, I mean, Rayan Ahmed's got 2 wickets, but looking at it now, you probably would have wanted a second seamer in. You know, Mark Wood would have looked at the pace and bounce, right, and thought to himself, I reckon I would have been okay on this wicket. So, look, these things happen. I didn't think it was a massive error when the team was announced, and I understood it. I think the issue is, for this particular lineup, compared to the last one, was we knew there was going to be one bowler who was going to go at anywhere between, 2.5 and 3.2 runs and over in Jack Leach. There's just no spinner. There's no defensive option spinner here. So a part of it means that they're going to be rotating through their spinners a lot more, which means, you know, other than Root, who that probably helps, it probably doesn't help the the younger bowlers as much, getting a rhythm and everything else. There's no pressure from the other end. So if you're Rayan Ahmed and you bowl a good over and then the next over, Tom Hartley bowls a full toss, a lot of that, you know, release comes out. So I think there's some elements of that, but I didn't think it was like the worst selection I've ever seen. William says, is Gill a perfect batter for Jimmy to bowl out? Plays with hard hands away from his body, has already got him 5 times. Yeah, so I talked about this obviously on the scoreboard. I wanted to talk about your question, William. It's interesting because realistically, I would think that Gill's biggest issue should be the ball coming back, and that's not Jimmy's best skill traditionally, but he has changed a little bit as a bowler with the wobble ball, and you know, his ability to bring the wobble ball back even on a surface like this, at least in 2, maybe even 3 of his spells, he got the balls to deviate a little bit. I thought was really special, and because of that, you know, the main wobble ball delivery really is still coming back in, right? Even for someone like Anderson, and I think in this way, Anderson was angling the ball back in and that one went away, and that's why Gill went for it. The problem for Gill is that there's a lot of bowlers around the world that do this. So I don't know if this makes Gill specifically a problem for Anderson, sorry, not the other way around, Anderson a problem for Gill, rather that anyone who's very good at that tight line coming back in to Gill, with the ability to move the wobble ball also the other way, is going to cause problems because you've already got the ball that can come back in, and you've now got a ball that can leave him. So it actually gives you 2 bites of the cherry against him. We've seen a lot of these batters come into Test cricket, like, Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell and Manas Labuschagne, some of the Pakistani batters as well, where they've kind of instantly conquered the wobble ball, almost like their techniques were more suited to it than other players, if that makes sense. But there's other players who probably are not suited to it, and maybe Shreyas Iyer is on that kind of one. A juggling geek says, bowlers pulling out of shots when the batter shaped up to switch hit pre-delivery. Was this just a way of keeping KP and Harsha rattled? It's interesting. I think we saw a few different things. We saw Shreyas Iyer back away to Tom Hartley. It did feel like England had made a decision, perhaps, and it could just be the spinners, but it almost felt like England had made a decision that if the batter was going to do that, they weren't going to bowl that delivery. We've seen Ashwin do that before, of course, as well. Is this a way of kind of limiting how often the opposition bat will do it? I don't know, but it's one worth watching going ahead. Matthew says, I would play Gill only in Australia, otherwise Sarfaraz should replace him. I don't think there's anything particularly in his record at the moment that suggests that. He's going through a form issue at the moment. You can't make a long-term judgment based on someone when they're out of form, and also when his game is going to develop, right? So what you might say at the moment is, we want him to develop more skills. Maybe there is a way of being him able to develop some of those things. I think it's a technical issue. Also, don't think it would work particularly well in Australia at the moment, because I think it's a form/technical. Well, it's a form funk, which I think has parts of technical issues within it. So if that's the case, playing him in Australia is not going to work either. And Wesh says, Anderson went from making Sachin his bunny, then having a great rivalry with Kohli, to now making Gill his bunny. Everything about his career is unbelievable. Yeah, Gill goes on to be the next great batter for India. He'll certainly have a great career in after dinner speaking in India for the rest of his life, won't he, Anderson? Not that I think he's going to struggle moving forward, but yeah, no, I think it's a fascinating connection, because also it's probably, if you think about it, when he bowled to Sachin, he's probably more the young bowler who sprayed it around a little bit faster, but swung it at pace. When he bowls to Kohli, he's more that really deadly accurate outswing bowler who obviously can, swing it both ways, but mostly outswing is his main weapon. And with Shubman Gill, we're seeing the wobble ball bowler, right? So with what he does, if he hadn't have changed, would it have worked to all those 3 batters? Probably not. Like, in some ways, he's been the perfect killer for each one of those when he's needed to be. Perfect example is what I was talking about with Shubman Gill. I think Shubman Gill would probably much prefer the outswing bowler version of Anderson than he would this current version, right? Whereas Kohli, maybe not as much with Kohli, but yeah, because Kohli did struggle with the wobble ball quite a bit as well. But yeah, it's fascinating to have the way that Anderson has changed and how that is, intertwined with quality Indian batting at different times. But yeah, someone else brought that up today. I thought it was really fascinating. Ankush says, is there a chance India ever having a foreign head coach? Rahul Dravid is great, but someone like Kirsten or John Wright would help India get over this last hurdle problems. Your thoughts? Don't think a foreign coach would make any difference than a national. I don't think the nationality of a coach makes any difference at all. So I think that there is still an issue within cricket where teams are not picking the best coaches, and partly that is nationality. I think it's a bit ridiculous that the centre countries haven't had Asian coaches. Like even someone like oh my God, I'm going to forget his name. The Victorian coach who coached Dav Watmore, who coached Pakistan, do Afghanistan as well? Was it Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka? I'm trying to remember all the different teams, national teams he's coached. But it is a bit ridiculous that he had so much success and still didn't find it. And, I think that in the future, there's certainly a missed option there. But the best coach should be the best coach. Raul Dravid isn't missing anything that any of those other people are. They might bring in a fresh way of playing, and that might make India better, or they might come in and they might spoil the apple cart, right? John Wright, certainly there were issues with him as a coach, or issues with Greg Chappell as a coach. There were issues with Gary Kirsten at times as a coach as well, right? And was Duncan Fletcher was another. So, India have had many non-Indian coaches before. I think as we go forward, I would like to think that coaches are on a salary now where they can get enough money that you can get the best coach coaching for the major teams, at least, if not everywhere. And if that is the case, we might see that sort of, what I would like to see is a kind of a professional coaching structure, whereas I think there's still sort of Ravi Shastri is a big name and he's a coach, and I still think we see that a little bit too much, in sports, but certainly in cricket. And what I would like to see is maybe something slightly more teams going out and trying to find the best coaches. Even training coaches up to be head coaches doesn't seem to be something that we look at particularly a lot in cricket. But I think cricket is still trying to understand what the coach's role is. And there's two reasons for that. One, we didn't always have a coach. And the other one is we have the captain there. So it is a different relationship than you see in teams like, sports like football or rugby or, sort of other ones going ahead. But yeah, India doesn't need an international coach. They just need whoever is the best coach available to them. I think that is the most important thing. Sandkelp says, is baseball getting to Indian batters, or is it a shorter format mindset the reason? There is a clear line between showing intent and carelessness. So thank you for the super chat, Sandkelp. I'd be really interested to know what shots you thought were them making mistakes today. So let's go through the dismissals off the top of my head. Rohit probably thought he was getting that down to fine leg. I don't think it was, a T20 inspired thing. Maybe there was an element of baseball having the leg slip. I think more often than not, you just hit that past leg slip and you don't really worry about it all that much. Shubman Gill was done by good bowling. As I said, I think the angle in kind of put him off, so he probably played at a ball that he shouldn't have. Maybe he should be leaving the ball more, but I think that's in his head a little bit at the moment as well. So certainly no problems with T20 or anything there. You then have one guy punch the ball back onto his stumps. Certainly not T20, as far as I'm aware. I don't watch all the leagues. And then you had, the shooter keep low. Right? So there's nothing wrong with what Shreyas Iyer did there. I still can't believe you get caught behind with the ball rolling on the ground. That is an unlucky dismissal. Then you had 2 wickets to short balls that were there to be hit, should have been hit, and were hit to the fielder. Were they a little bit loose? I think that's fair. But I didn't see any showing intent. Carelessness, yes. But what I would say is that both of those wickets came to poor balls against non-specialist batters. So, you've got a wicketkeeper batter who's batting at number 7, and you have a guy batting at number 6 who I think averaged 16 batting at number 6 like 10 times in his life before today. Not that he doesn't have batting talent, but they're not specialist batters. They got loose balls, they tried to put them away, and they hit them straight to the fielder. I don't have a big issue with that. So going through it, no, I don't think there's anything in that suggests the shorter format mindset and the England mindset, unless they were hoping that people were going to cut the ball. I do think there's something about the silly point field, the leg slip field, the in-out fields of baseball that I've been interested in. But I don't know if it played a huge part in any wicket today other than the leg slip one. I'm trying to think if there's another one where the field played a part in the shot. No, because there was the one that rolled on the ground and then the one that spun back on the ground, right? So I really don't think that we can give them too much credit for that. I thought India batted pretty well paced today. Jaiswal was obviously outstanding. Patidar did what he had to do. thought Jaiswal looked like he was going to make some runs. I thought Gill looked like he was going to make some runs. So I don't really have a big issue. I think you're probably judging that more on the fact that, again, we see India lose a lot of wickets on a pitch that they shouldn't have. But I do think there was a couple of, I don't want to say flukish wickets in the one that kept low and the one off the glove that rolled back. I mean, it kept low, so it could have bowled him, and it hit his glove, so it could have popped up in the air. But more often than not, though, you're not going to get out the way that those two did. And then there was the 2 cut shots at the end, which is also fair. Because they fit your narrative, but I don't think they were from over-attacking or from the wrong balls or from great field placements from England. It was just that they cut them straight to the fielders. That's probably an execution thing because they're not 2 specialist batters. All right, let's have a break here. And then after the break, I'll see if there's anything left in the room. I am Jared Kimber, and this is the Scoreboard.
A lot of people complain. If you have always wanted to turn your passion for sports into a career, well, I have the course for you. Fans with Laptops is the multimedia course that I came up with after millions of reads, views, and listens to all my work. It's designed for anyone to use their own fandom to get better at making content on the sport they love. Go to Fans with Laptops today. If me talking live about cricket is not enough, we also have an entire channel dedicated to the best stories in cricket called Good Areas. Find out what matchups really mean, understand the logic behind baseball, and look at the most important selection in the history of cricket of Basil D'Oliveira. Come and visit us a couple of times a week on the Good Areas channel for a new video.
All right, welcome back. Let's just see if there is anything else that's worth having a look at. Yeah. All right. Who have we got coming up? I've taken everything from the normal chat, but please, if you want to put any more comments in or any chats, feel free to. But if you're desperate to ask a question, Super Chat's the only way I'll be able to accept them from here on in. But Juggling Geek, so it is Juggling Geek I wanted, isn't it? Yeah. Juggling Geek says, Jaiswal, unlucky dismissal or outstanding wicket keeping from folks. No, it's an unlucky dismissal in that what percentage of the time when the ball keeps low do you edge and the ball still makes it through to a wicketkeeper? Like, no, it's a brilliant effort from folks, but generally when the ball keeps that low, you're not getting an outside edge anyway, right? Like, that's not, when the ball keeps low, you're going to be bowled or LBW. That's how you get out. It's a really freak to point to get an edge and then for that edge to carry, right? Because generally the ball's already on its way down because it's keeping low. So if you get an edge, generally it would keep low on the way through the wicketkeeper, and most wicketkeepers wouldn't have caught it. So it's outstanding wicketkeeping from folks, but that isn't the fluky part of it. The fluky part is the fact that he edged a ball that was keeping low and was caught behind. That is not a normal. There aren't many dismissals where players get out that particular way. If you get that ball, and I don't know how many times. Let's say that ball's been bowled 100 times in Test cricket. It's probably taken 5 or 6 wickets, right? And I would say almost all those other wickets beforehand would have been drags on to the stumps, right? Like, it's just not a way that you get caught behind. So no, it's definitely unlucky from that point of view. Excellent skill from folks, but I'm not really talking about the folks catch. I'm more talking about just how unlucky it is to get caught behind off a ball that does that. Jessica says Bharat's wicket and maybe Akshar's wicket would not have happened today under normal bowling over rates. Yeah, it was shocking when we all looked up and suddenly realised how far ahead England were, especially in the last test when how far behind they fell. I suppose Jimmy Anderson's run-up is not as long as Mark Wood's. It may be a part of it. Jack Leach, I was going to say Jack Leach limping, but it's that's more day 3 onwards, wasn't it? So I don't think he really had that much of an issue. So it's a huge turnaround from England. It's interesting when you talk about that because there is certainly an element of, at the end of the day, batters do struggle. I can't remember what it is, but I think batters are really good at playing for lunch and tea, but struggle a little bit more playing for the end of the day. And I think there's a tiredness factor to that, probably attached in some cases as well, maybe a few different issues, but that's certainly a case. So the ability to, I'm not saying that the extra overs count, although I see what you're saying, they wouldn't have bowled those overs normally, but also if you can bowl with multiple spinners and get through your overs quite quickly, you almost want to not bowl as quickly before that period and bowl as many overs as possible in that last hour. And it's not a tactic I've seen teams do as much, but I'm pretty, unless I'm misremembering the stats, and someone did this, he had a Substack, and I've forgotten the name of it, but it was really good analysis. But yeah, it was something, it was quite interesting for me. So there are elements there, but you know, teams should just bowl their 90 overs, really. That's the game. Sarah Chandra says, can this Indian bowling lineup stop England tomorrow on this track and take the lead? Oh, I mean, generally you would assume that with a couple of balls already keeping low, it's a really good wicket, by the way. You know, it's good for batting again, good for spin bowling, good for pace. 2 fantastic pitches so far. But the ball was keeping a little bit lower. We know that the history of this wicket is generally that it gets worse throughout the game. They don't play a lot of cricket here, but you know, what we have certainly suggests that. But the ball came onto the bat quite well. I didn't think there was anything from a, you know, sideways spin or bounce, you know, a high bounce thing that was going to bother England massively. Jadeja's not playing, but Akshar and Ashwin should still get enough out of their surface to put a lot more pressure on. So the big difference you should see between the two is now they know is what England is going to try and do. And we know that the ball is going to stay a little bit harder and continue to sort of spin and bounce. Like Rayan Ahmed's wicket to Padadar was, what, the 60th over, I want to say? And that still got a lot of bounce on it. I know it's a wrist spinner. But the point being is that this is not a wicket at the moment. It looks like the ball's going to go really soft and you're going to struggle, which means that the Indian spinners should be in it a little bit more. Might be harder to sweep and reverse sweep Akshar, you know, on this kind of pitch compared to what it was on the last pitch. But in England, play a disruptive format of cricket. So, you know, I still think they're in it. As I said, I think I might have said this at the start. I think England, you can get them between 7 and 10 to 1. They were certainly 10s at one stage. They might have come in a little bit before, after Barrett's wicket. That doesn't seem to me like a particularly good odds for where this game is balanced. I thought England had the better of the day, but I still think India is well in front. I do want to see India's bowlers bowl well, though, against this lineup. That's the one thing I find it harder to make an assumption based on that. Giant says, what are your thoughts on selection of India's 11? Did they get it right by making the bowling strong on a flat pitch, or should they added Sarfaraz or Washi to make the batting stronger? I mean, they've got batting down to 8. So, yes, it was 9 last game, and I'm not massively confident with Akshar at number 6. But they do have batting down to number 8. So, do they really need to be, like, I just don't think you need your number 9 to be strong in that situation. Jadeja makes things different, of course, because he's a frontline bowler who's going to play anyway. And yes, as I said before, it's really a top 5 with sort of 3 number 7, 8 type players after that. But, you know, we know that Akshar and Ashwin are perfectly, you know, good batters in these kinds of conditions. You know, have the ability to take time out of the game, but also score runs. And KS Barrett is certainly not a clown with the bat by any stretch of the imagination, right? We probably won't know whether India got it right or wrong until after they have bowled. I would have brought Kuldeep in. I think this is the 11 I more or less was suggesting myself. I probably would have added KS ahead of Akshar. But, you know, there's not much in it. And I can see why they wanted the left-hander slightly higher in the order. And also Akshar, you know, he's the backup to Jadeja. He's kind of doing Jadeja's job. But yeah, we'll know more by the end of the test, right? But you know, even if India win this test and they only use 4 bowlers, then you could still make the case that they probably didn't need the extra bowler. But they are clearly more confident when they have more bowling options. I think we've seen that in their one-day side and their test side. It seems to be the way that Rohit and Rahul Dravid, wrong Rahul, both seem to like it, that extra amount. And realistically, your top 5 usually is what's going to make you the most of runs anyway, right? Sarah Chandra says, is Stokes employing a plan that gives new bowlers confidence in the first innings, and can they get their likes correct? But by bowling large in the first innings, I'm not quite sure what you mean there. I'll get their lines correct by bowling large in the first innings. Well, he doesn't have a choice of bowling them, right? Like, what's your other option? He's got 3 young spinners. He's going to have to bowl them. Joe Root was poor today. I would say on line and length, he'd probably be the least accurate of the bowlers today. On line and length on some deliveries, as I might have said in the piece already. So that didn't make it any easier. But then what other choice did he have? The only other bowler he's got is a 41-year-old seamer. So he had to bowl the young spinners. Also, that is their job, right? Their job is not just to bowl in the second innings. They have to bowl in the first innings. I do think that this is where Leach is a problem because, you know, you really want Leach. At least with Leach, they could say, can you bowl 40 overs today and go at, I don't know, let's say 3.1 runs and over. And we can then rotate our guys at the younger guys at the other end. Whereas they really didn't have a stock spinner today. And, you know, that's probably the difference between them really being in front in this game and not, because they still got the wickets. But there's not much they can do. They only have one guy that's like that. And last time I saw him, his leg was 3 times its natural size. So not ideal from that perspective. But, you know, that's the game. And that's how they go about it. Bashir will be better in the second. I mean, there's not a spinner in this game outside of perhaps Joe Root, who wouldn't probably be better in the second innings than he is in the first innings. And that depends on this pitch. If this pitch keeps its pace, then even Joe Root won't mind that. But I don't think he likes bowling when the pace goes out of the wicket. He likes it when he's almost bowling more like cutters than traditional off spin at times. So yeah, I think England's only choice was to bowl the spinners because they picked a bunch of them. I think was it William at the start who said, oh no, it was DM who said at the start that it's very, very hard to rotate through spinners when you have that many in your side. You know, we've seen this in general with even once you have 5 bowlers in an attack, it's really tough. But once you have 3 spinners, it's really hard to know because essentially if 2 of them are bowling well, you kind of just stick with those 2. So the other one ends up on their own. We've seen that with Akshar before. You know, I think we've seen that with Kuldeep before. And now with England, you have this other problem where what they really want is one guy to bowl from one end and just keep it tight and maybe take 1 or 2 wickets in the day and let their younger spinners, you know, come in and out when they're needed and bowl with pressure on at the other end. And instead, they're all bowling together. And Jimmy Anderson was the only one who managed to keep any pressure on today. Everyone else bowled poor balls regularly, over-pitched regularly, a couple of short balls, a couple of full tosses as well. But they didn't have a horrible day. Sometimes that's how these things go. Well, that's it for the scoreboard today. Let us come back again tomorrow. We'll be here for every day of this test, as we always are. Thank you to everyone who commented. Even the ones I didn't get to read out. Who got in here? No, I read out one of Sam. Him in issue. See him here. Matthew John. I don't know if I read out one of his. Matt Hav. Vinit. There's quite a few people in the chat. No one knows. Zen. And Henry Coleman. Thank you to everyone for chatting, talking, listening, watching, sharing, all the different things you do. Please throw us a like on the way out. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, what on earth are you doing with your life? I'm Jared Kimber, and this is The Scoreboard.
This is just one of our YouTube channels. We also have another one that covers the greatest stories in our sport called Good Areas. Why do India keep losing World Cups? How did Stuart Broad become a meme king? And the long sordid history of South Africa chasing. Head over to Good Areas a couple of times a week for the best stories in cricket.
A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be, and from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that.
But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster, making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.